So today I'm just going to run through disassembling and actually installing your MAXX Conversion kit. So what we're going to start with is we're going to get everything off the gun. We're going to get the barrel ready. We're going to get the engine ready with the proper nozzle, which will also work with an AEG nozzle as well if you're running an AEG. Just make sure that you know that ahead of time. The box mags must be wired to run properly off of a JST style connection. Alrighty, so we're going to get on with that. Some stuff will be done off camera, but I will at least show y'all what it is that I have done after I have done it. Also, be mindful, some of your body pins may be very tight. You can generally overcome this by just loosening one side of the thumb screw. While it is still in the threading, you can actually proceed with tapping it out with either a hammer, butt end of a large screwdriver, or even some C-clamps if you have them laying around. Just anything to get some weight onto that. So just to start, I'm working on getting the stock off, which is fairly simple. Alrighty. So we now have the stock off the gun. So the next option is we're going to start disassembling the barrel. Same process. I did that last part off the bench because it's a little bit easier when I'm dealing with the electronics and whatnot, just to make sure that everything gets done properly. Make sure all these thumb screws stay together. Setting those off to the side, as well as all of our parts. So once that one has been removed, we disconnect all this. He has a screw here, but actually I know his is slightly broken, so I know that it should just pop on out, or maybe not. It is what it is. Where did my Phillips head go? There we go. My Phillips head was already in there. So we're just going to take out that screw real quick. His is broken, but just make sure you don't over tighten the screw. If you do, you shall most likely break that little ring off there, as he already has. As you can see, there's no more ring right there where it's supposed to be. So we've removed that. The next step would usually be the body pins. He, for whatever reason, does not have any, so we're now going to skip to the bottom here. We are going to need to remove both of these pins here, because we're going to need them already removed anyways for later steps. Dang, I'm just dropping everything. Alright, put those up here in a second. Trying to go somewhat quick here because I want to keep this video somewhat to a minimum. So then we have this. We're going to figure out which one that is. Probably should have done this beforehand. But if you have a railed model, it's going to have a bolt here. If you don't have a railed model, it will not have a bolt right there, just so y'all know. So if you do not have a railed model, there should not be bolts right there. Just a heads up. Next step is actually going to be removing this front screw, which will always be here, but depending on the gun, you may or may not have that exact, this kind of same screw or even the same assembly up here. This gun has already been touched by Viking Combative Customs. This is a early gen barrel of theirs. It's great. I love it. My only gripe with it is it's a little wobbly. You can, even when it's screwed, you can still wiggle it, but it's really not that big of a deal. Anyways, so with those out, we're actually going to flip this over. You should have the pin out here. You should have your body pins out here. If you have a screw at the bottom, you should have it removed. If you have a screw at the front, on the front sight post, you should have that removed as well. So next, we are going to pop this little collar out. So this collar is actually what makes sure that this little tab right here stays into place for that exact reason. You saw the spring likes to just run away. So we're going to set that to the side. We're going to double check what size that is. Yep, right one. So you need to remove that to remove this dust cover here. So you need to remove that collar to allow this little tab to flip up to let us access the screw right here underneath the dust cover. Set that to the side, and then I'm actually just going to use, where did it go? A punch here. Use just a little punch just to lift that up and out of the place. Be very careful. These tabs at the front like to break, and these tabs like to bend outwards if you are not careful when disassembling and reassembling that. So now we have the barrel block, and the barrel should be completely loose. Be very careful here if you're pulling the hop unit with it. Ah, yes. I always forget this. So on these railed models, you actually are going to need to finagle with it just a little bit, because there is, and I'll show it to y'all in just a second here. BB out of the body for whatever reason. So as you can see, how this barrel block sits in there, there's this plate right here. You kind of have to finagle that barrel block down in there and finagle it kind of out, because that barrel block actually sits right behind that plate. You can see the bolt that goes through the bottom here goes right there. So that can be a pain. Just be careful with that. You just kind of have to finagle with it, wiggle it around until you get it loose. So now we have the body. We're actually going to set that aside for just a second. I am going to go ahead and carefully remove the inner barrel. I say carefully because these original hop units, they like to crack right here around this locking lug as you're disassembling. Make sure you get the spring with it. Pull it out. Your inner barrel will not look like this. This is an aftermarket inner barrel, but as I was talking about earlier, these Viking Combative Customs outer barrels, dang, why do you not want to, there you go, are very nice. Middle carbon fiber tube, milled original barrel block end of the outer barrel. I'm going to show you all that. So that is the original barrel block, and it is perfectly milled. I believe they're epoxied into place. There's no pins or anything. Same with the up front, and they seem to handle that pretty damn well. But overall, super light, still a bit heavier than some of the fully 3D printed or fully carbon fiber barrels out there, but really robust, great option, and also maintains the original look of the Stoner with the cut down gas block and front side post. So anyway, we're gonna set those aside and keep our barrel block. We will be keeping our barrel block. We're gonna keep the barrel block separate for now. So disassembling the hop unit, what you're going to do is very carefully remove this little fin here. We're going to carefully remove that little piece. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and remove any springs. And the metal collar on this one seems to be not the proper metal collar that came with the gun, because it's actually sitting inside of the hop unit instead of at the front like it should. But that doesn't really matter. I'm going to be disassembling this, so I don't really care if the nub comes out or whatever. So I'm just going to start pulling the inner out. And I have worked on this gun before, so I was the one who actually installed this barrel, which it does seem like he got a decent amount of use, decent amount of residue in there, as well as a BB. Haha. Should put that out real quick. There we go. Alrighty. This maple leaf seems to have taken a beating. I don't know how many rounds he put through this since I last touched it, but we are going to go ahead and give him a new bucket. So we're going to remove that one, because it seems very residue coated, and we're going to go with something else. So yeah, left with the barrel, and at this point we're going to install the MAXX. This is a MAXX M4P. I'll move our old parts aside. I am going to take a second off camera and off video to clean and polish this barrel. Actually, real quick, before I do this off camera, I am going to show y'all. I use Mother's Mag and Aluminum polish, just a tiny little dab onto a cleaning cloth. These are for real firearms, but they also work perfectly fine for airsoft. You can just grab you two little squares. I usually like to fold them into a triangle, and then stick them through the end of a cleaning rod that's actually connected to a drill. But we're going to start this first. This is an isopropyl alcohol water mixture. I use this for all types of things, from cleaning gear to also cleaning inner barrels, just getting any base level of residue off. And we're also going to finish with this as well after the mother's mag. But we're going to start with it to see what comes off. If there's still more, we'll hit it with the mother's mag, and then afterwards we'll hit it with one clean one after the mother's mag to get any excess mothers off the barrel. And then we're going to hit it with an isopropyl one to clean off any residue, and then we're going to hit it with one more clean one to dry it. Alrighty, so with the barrel polished and clean, we are now going to get on to setting up our new barrel setup. So I've gone with a Maple Leaf MR Hop 70 degree, the silicones. These work really well. They're meant for cold weather, so they're very friction resistant because they're meant to run cold weather and still be heated up from the friction of the BB and not tear or even crack in extreme cold. So these silicones are going to be very wear resistant, and that's why I always go for these in LMGs. As well as the MR hops, I use them as long as they work well with the hop window cut. If this one happens to not work well for whatever reason with this hop window cut, I'll go with something else, and I'll let y'all know of that change. But for now, until I figure that out, we're going to stick with the MR hops, because I've had some great experience with them so far. So I'm going to go ahead and remove our new MAXX M4P out of the packaging. These are actually very simple to work on. They're just a little bit of a pain because they decided to go with some very small screws this time around on the MAXX. And you can see that because of the inclusion of a very tiny 1mm hex. So we are going to go ahead and keep any of the little baggies that this comes with. So we're going to set them to the side, as well as the instructions. We don't really need those because I'm going to walk y'all through what y'all need to do for these. And these are actually even easier if you happen to have the M4 or the ME Sport, the old gen. It's even easier to install than the newer ones. The only issue is those are all discontinued and almost perpetually out of stock everywhere. So, but what we are looking for here, as we do have the flat nub, we're going to be looking for this one. So for any Maple Leaf bucking, you always want a concave nub. So we're looking for the sled that is actually the concave sled with the rubber buffer and the spring in it. So we're going to be swapping that out, as well as we're going to be removing the push to release arm at the bottom of the hop unit. So to start, we're going to disassemble by pressing off the adjustment ring, setting that to the side. And if you want, you can even set it down in this bit. You can set that on a desk somewhere so all your little bits and pieces don't go rolling away. Next step, that tiny little hex key. So we're going to take that out. We are, if I can open the Ziploc bag, that is. We're going to take that out. Again, keep all of these little Ziploc bags. They come in handy when you need to store all your spare parts. So right in the top here, there's a little set screw that holds this side pin in right here. We just need to loosen the set screw all the way. Be sure to do this over some flat space or area and do it very carefully, because I have lost these little set screws on multiple occasions because they are very tiny and they come out very quickly, just like that. See? Fucking tiny. Like they look like a little just piece of like plastic crap or just doo-doo or fucking like a little pebble or whatever. So you can lose these very easily, so that's why I say keep all this shit around. For now, I'm just going to set it on top of the foam there so I know where it is. But now, I'm just going to use my fingernail to pull out this metal pin. Should come out fairly easily. It has a nice flat spot where that little set screw was, so we're going to set that in there. Then we're going to very carefully remove the hop arm and hop tensioner, the sled, as I've been referring to them. And we're going to make sure we do not lose the tiny little spring that comes with it. We're going to set the arm to the side. While this is fully disassembled, I'm also going to go ahead. I'm going to get the smallest little Phillips head that I have, and we are going to remove the little BB latch here. It has 2 screws, 1 on each side, as well as 2 springs that you need to worry about coming out. You want to make sure you hang on to all of these. So when that first screw is removed, I'm going to grab it before it actually comes off of my Phillips head. I'm just going to drop it down in this little baggie. Same with the other side. To move it. Alright, it's popped free. I'm going to make sure I get it off here completely and grab it with my fingers again before I completely let go of it. I'm going to carefully set that down, make sure those springs don't fly out. Drop the other little screw in here. I'm going to set the screwdriver down, and now you should be able to carefully kind of like put your finger on the springs as you pull it out, so that way you don't lose them. Grab them both, throw them, as well as the little hop BB latch into this little bag that you got the hex key out of. And we're going to keep hanging on to the hex key for now because we do have to reinstall everything. So now, as I said, we're going to find the little baggie that has, well, it's really hard to see on the camera now that I'm looking at it just because of the brightness in here. But it's a little baggie with another spring, a hop tensioner, and a little rubber, what looks like it would be like a hop nub, but it is not. In fact, I'm going to show y'all what that is used for. And this is why a lot of people, they forget to install this because they don't know the point of it, and then they wonder why they're not getting enough hop tension on the MAXXs. And it's actually, this hop tensioner is concave and it's a metal contact patch. So you can see the concave patch there, and it is metal, and it slides up and down in the groove here, like so, right? So it moves up and down right there as you adjust the hop wheel. One key thing you need to do is make sure you put this little rubber piece on there. That little rubber piece actually adds a sort of cushioning. It's very hard. It's not soft. It's a pretty hard rubber piece, but it adds a little bit of a cushion between the hop arm, like the adjustment lever, and the actual tensioner on the bottom, which is pressing into your bucking. And the other thing we're going to have to do is get this tiny little fucking spring. Jesus Christ, there we go. Okay. We're going to get this tiny little spring, and we're going to very carefully set it on the top of the hop unit like so. We're going to take our hop unit tensioner. We're going to watch the spring go into the little hole on the tensioner. This might take y'all a couple tries. It's definitely a pain in the ass, so I will go ahead and pause, and I will come back whenever I have it installed, because I don't want to waste time on this video. Right. So I have gotten it back in, and I went ahead and put the hop arm over it, and I'm just holding it in with my finger. So we're going to take the pin, we're going to make sure the flat side is facing up at the hole where the set screw once was. I'm going to slide it back in, and we're going to take, we can then release finger off. We don't have to hold that anymore because it's not being held in place. I'll set that down for a second. We're going to get our tiny little hex key and our itty bitty baby hex screw. We're going to go ahead and put it on the hex key, make sure it stays on. And then we're going to come over here to the hop arm, and we are going to reinstall that little set screw. Make sure it's snug, don't crank it down. If this is a tiny little hex key, you're going to break it if you try and crank it down. So we're not done with that hex key, we're done with the screw, not using it anymore. We're going to add it to that little baggie where we originally got it, that now also has our BB latch, the 2 screws, and the 2 springs. We're going to drop that down in there, set that to the side. And then in the baggie that had the new hop tensioner and spring, we're going to open that up, and we're going to put the old one in, which is actually the flat rubber nub. If you like this, it's a soft rubber, like flat nub that's on a sled that you can install. Or the other option is, I believe, a sled that just have a spot for you to put any standard hop unit tensioner that would come with any bucking that you want to use. Say like a modified black hop tensioner or any others like that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the spring in there, put those parts away. We're going to put those 2 little baggies, the instructions, and our other hop tensioner that we didn't use back in the baggie here. we are going to get our hop adjustment wheel. We're going to find the side closest to the inner circle. We're going to align that with the top of the hop unit. I'm going to start pressing it down and just kind of guide the hop arm into that slot. So now we now have a hop unit that functions. So we're going to make sure that is all the way unadjusted. We're going to get our new bucking. And I have cleaned the hop unit and the outside of the hop, clean, polished the barrel, and as well as clean the outside of the barrel where the old bucking was. We're just going to slide this on, and we're going to come down here. On these silicones, they like to stretch a lot, so you want to run your finger along the edge of them. Make sure you get this outer edge like pretty together. Maybe you can just run your fingernail across it and just get the whole thing lined back up and not like stretched more on one side than the other. This will actually help a lot with these feed lips, which do not like to form a perfect circle all the time. And you're just going to kind of mess with them. Can't really see exactly as I'm doing it because I have to look at it closely. But we're just going to make sure that those feed lips seat properly around the barrel. And then we are going to top of the hop window, make sure the bottom line is aligned at the bottom. It should pop right in, and then I'm just going to check it in the hop unit that the hop window patch is at the very top, and that the bucking lips are actually centered in the hop unit and not like oblong or creating any other non-circular shape, which would be not ideal. Going to pop out our little barrel clip here. To carefully install that. This can be kind of difficult the first couple of times because this clip is pretty damn snug to the hop unit itself, but just kind of play with it. It should pop into place eventually, and it should look like so. Alright, so now we're going to not use the O-ring because the O-ring's kind of pointless. We're going to pull out our brass washer and our barrel spring. We're going to, it actually seems he happened to use just a MAXX washer already on this, so he has an extra one. That must be why it did not fit properly in that hop unit. But we're going to just install that and then install the new barrel spring. You could use the other one. They look about the same. Let me feel the tension. The MAXX one definitely feels stronger than whatever the one that he had on his barrel was, so we're going to keep that off there. We're going to leave the new MAXX one on there. Plus, it's nice and shiny. So, but now that that is all in, barrel clip is installed. I'm just going to point the barrel up to some light, start applying some hop, and I'm just going to make sure that we are getting a nice hop patch going across the top of the barrel. These MRs I've noticed, especially with heavier weight BBs, you're going to find that they like to be around the 5 to 7 mark on the hop units to get a nice concave shape at the top, which also equates to a fairly middle ground, nice flat trajectory, depending on what FPS you're at. But it's a good middle mark that you can start the hop unit on when you go to start shooting, so that way you're not just shooting into the ground and then you go start going up from there. I usually start somewhere just between the 5 and the 7 mark. So now that the barrel is set up, we're going to set that to the side. It's been cleaned, it's been polished, it's been installed, it's all ready to go. I'm going to throw the O-ring back in here with the brass washer and throw this big ass piece of foam back in the original bag. And we're going to ziplock that. Actually, I'm going to throw his little bag for his bucking in here as well. Boom. And now we can just totally just set that to the side because we don't need it. Next step, we're going to go back to the gun. We're going to work on getting the grip off. Fairly simple. And then we are going to open up the gearbox and we are going to pull out the parts that are not needed, as well as make sure we install the proper nozzle. So. So we are going to does have one of my AEG or HPA 10-degree angle pistol grips on here. So I am going to be quite careful with these screws because of the greatly increased grip degree. These screws do have a habit of stripping if you do not make sure that you are absolutely on the screw when you are loosening it or tightening it. So we're just going to make sure that I am completely on each one of these before I start screwing, as some of his are already pretty close to being stripped. Alright, that screws all the way out. There it is. All 4 grip screws out and grip out. We're going to set the grip to the side, grip screws to the side. We have our engine out. The last step here would just be this last bolt on top. Once you get a flathead and loosen that, kind of hard to show on the camera because this is a very long object that I'm trying to remove a screw at the end of. So I'm just going to do it in my lap real quick and then we'll show you all the screw. Alright, got it all the way out. So that's the screw that comes out. Goes right back in this back hole through your gearbox. We're going to set that one to the side as well. And now, when to remove his gearbox, make sure we're very careful with the wiring going up through the back end of the body. Here's our gearbox. You can see how he has his wired. He actually ran the FCU to the rear and then ran his JST connection for the box mag from the TCU cable all the way through his grip or through his gearbox and then back to the front where it sticks out the front of the gun. And I believe I might have already installed a stock M4 nozzle on this, but we're going to go ahead and install the proper nozzle regardless because he did buy another one. So we're going to do that to ensure that we are installing the right nozzle length. But real quick, before we move any further with the gearbox, I am just going to quickly remove the front handguard rails because he did say he did not want them on here anymore. So we're going to take those off and set those to the side, and I will start back off whenever we're ready to disassemble the gearbox. Alrighty, so when you remove these 4 screws, this whole plate, as I was referring to earlier about the barrel block, comes right out with all 4 of the screws, and then the rail portion should just swing right off. So I'm going to set this to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and just clean off his rail a little bit for him here for a second, and then I will continue on with the rest of the install with the gearbox. Alrighty, with a touch-up done on the front rail, we're now going to set that entire body assembly to the side. We do need to do one more thing to it, but I'll get to that in just a second. And we are going to go to the gearbox. So first things first, his safety does, or his selector plate does move back and forth freely, so that's good. It's not snagging on the trigger switch. We're going to move to the other side. So he does have just the bare minimum as to what I would suggest for any sort of gearbox install for HPA, which is the front 2 pins, a pin in front, or a front 2 screws, screw in front and behind the trigger, and then at least 1 in the rear. In this case, he has 2 in the rear. Both are fine, both work completely fine. So we're going to go ahead and start with the removal of these screws. Ideally, we're going to leave them in this half of the gearbox. one is free before I move on to the next. I really need to get a new small screwdriver. I busted the magnet in this one so that it does not hold bits properly anymore. They like to just fall out the front. It was very aggravating. Alright, with all screws removed, you should be able to lift the gearbox off, or at least this half. We're going to remove our spring guide, which in this case has already been cut down and disassembled for the install of the engine. And everything on the inside of the gearbox does look pretty clean. I was the last person to clean this and maintenance it, so everything still looks clean. Doesn't look like he used it too much from then until now. Only thing we're going to do is I'm going to open up the engine cylinder, just the front cylinder, very carefully. Should be fairly clean still. Yes, it is. Oh yeah, we are good to go. So nozzle still feels nice and smooth in the front part of the cylinder. Remove that. So not the absolute cleanest, but it's definitely still in good shape. So we're going to remove that nozzle. I'm actually going to double check the length of that nozzle before I put it in any other bags. That way I can be sure to... Oh yes, it is short. Okay. So we're going to take this 1 second. I'm going to go over here. Measure it with my calipers. This is 21.47 millimeter. Grab a little Sharpie real quick. We're going to drop this into the other bag. Alright. .47, and then we're going to hang on to that. So I'm going to set that over there. So on the new nozzle, we're going to get us just a little bit of Tech Salve. If you don't have any, you could always just try running it through the front end of this just a little bit and seeing if that, does the job. I am actually going to real quick run a bit of a shop towel through the front end here, just to remove any sort of dust or dirt or residue around those front O-rings. So in doing so, I'm just putting a shop towel through it, and I'm just going to spin it around and pull that on out. And yeah, there was a decent amount in there, so I'm glad that we did wipe that out real quick. So I just like to take the O-ring and just spin it lightly in kind of the base layer of grease here, and then I take the edge of the container and I spin the entire body of the nozzle around the edge, basically just wiping off excess. So, and I didn't even go all the way around the nozzle yet, because this is still going to get inserted here, and then when I do insert it, I'm going to spin it around a little bit. So it will have a decent amount of lubricant. And I am going to add just a tiny bit in front of the O-ring, because that is what is going to contact the sealing O-ring on the front of the cylinder that keeps all the air inside the gun and not spewing out the outside. So we're going to carefully slide our nozzle down and in. Once the nozzle is in, as I said, I'm just going to take it, move it back and forth a little bit, spin it around. This will help spread a lot of that lubricant. And then we're going to reinstall the cylinder head. Quite a bit of turns to get these on completely. Once that is completely to the front, we're just going to give the nozzle a couple presses and give it some spins. And sounds good. I'm going to install that back into our gearbox. I'm going to take the rear screw that I took out of the back of the gearbox. I'm going to install it into the spring guide just a little bit. And then I'm going to set it here in the back of the gearbox, like so. I'm now going to double check all of my wire routing. I'm going to make sure none of it will get pinched. All of it is free of the trigger and not in the way. And then I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the other half of the gearbox, which should be a fairly simple task. As you're doing this, before you press it all the way down, wiggle your wires, ensure everything is still free and not pinched. And once you've done that, and you are confident you can reinstall, I always like to start with one at the front and then one at the back to make sure the entire gearbox is closed and pinched together and nothing is going to come off or out on you while you're busy screwing in the rest of the screws around the gearbox. So one in the front, one in the back. Add a little pressure to this rear screw just to make sure your spring guide doesn't come back out. And now we can go ahead and go on screwing the rest. Alrighty, so with all that done, we're going to take the rear screw out of the gearbox. I'm going to set that to the side. You have one part I need to grab real quick. This kit is getting that I forgot to set on the table. And this needs to be shown because this is a part that is included in every one of these kits, and that is a front gearbox centering clip. So what this does is this allows any stock G&P gearbox that is being installed back into a Stoner to be properly front centered with the nozzle perfectly in the body. And all you have to do is you take this little clip that comes with your kit, find the side that has that little dimple on it, and find the side of your gearbox that has the dimple on it. And you're just going to install this clip, and it should slide right on and be kind of held in place on the front of the gearbox. And that, when we install the gearbox, I will show you all again, that is what will center your nozzle left to right in the body of the gun and won't allow for any flex. Otherwise, if you were to install the MAXX kit, you would actually need to remove that front contact pin connection, this little black piece that went right here around your nozzle. That needs to be removed to allow for the MAXX to sit properly, and that would normally get your left to right centering pretty dead on, but without that, the front part of the gearbox or engine has no way to center itself and generally has a decent amount of flex because it's only being held in by the grip screws and the rear buffer screw. So adding this little clip allows it to be sandwiched between the sides of the body and perfectly centered. So, real quick, I do need to remove one more thing from the body, and it's this VCC installed dovetail adapter for 249 MAXX. So I'm just going to remove this real quick, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so we're about to the only major modification you have to make for this install, and that is the hole on the bottom. You will notice this gun already has 2 holes on the bottom. That was for the VCC style dovetail adapter. This could cause some problems, but we will find out. So now out of your kit, you're going to want to grab the drill guide, and it might already have the drill spacer installed. You're going to want to make sure if it's not, just go ahead and install that into the guide. This lets you start with a smaller drill bit that will still be centered. And what we're going to do is we're just going to grab it. We're going to make sure these 2 fin sides are actually up here because it won't actually install properly if you do it back here. It just won't. Nothing fits that way. So you can only make it fit this way, but just know it's going to be snug, and what you're going to have to do is grab it and pop it down into place. And then as an added measure, I do like to put the body pins in. So we're going to get the 2 body pins that went up here at the bottom of the gun, and we're going to insert them. They may be snug. I've noticed that some of these guns don't always have pins that fit properly in their gun, which is a little worrying, but they usually go in with being tapped in, so just keep that in mind. Same with the other front pin. Just make sure that one goes in. Alright, well, with those body pins mostly in, what is left to do is drill the hole. So you're going to go ahead and get your drill bits and get your drill. And at this point, you should have nothing installed inside the gun. The gun should be empty on the inside, so that way we don't have any issues. Now, as I said, that hole that was already drilled may cause us some problems, but we're about to find out. Worst case scenario, when you get to the bit that's wider than the hole that's already drilled, just be very careful when you are actually drilling said hole, and you should be okay. But what we're going to do is this hole here does already fit a 3/16 bit drill bit. Just make sure you have a bit that's good enough for what we're doing here. 3/16 isn't going to be too large for the metal. Just make sure you're going in nice and slow, and you can even add a little bit of lubricant if you'd like to the drilling area. I've done multiple already without any of that, so I don't think it's really necessary. Just be very careful and go slowly as to not fuck up your gun. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and drill this first hole off camera, just so I can make sure it gets drilled in the right spot, considering that other hole is already where I need this one to be, which is not a good thing. So. So with that first one drilled, I do like to swap out up to a 15/64, and we're going to pull that original spacer out. We're going to go with the 15/64, and we're again going to carefully try to widen that hole that already exists and not fuck up my bits. Lovely. Alright, so 5/64 done. So after 5/64, I'm going to jump up to a 5/16, which is only one step beneath our last one. Go ahead and get that installed. Make sure we're at a higher torque setting, low speed. That way we get lots of control over what we're doing here. Alright, so we only have one more step to go, and that is your 3/8. Be sure that you are doing this in a safe manner and not like me in my fucking lap, but it's what I got to work with. So clamp this in, make sure it's away from my groin. Make sure that hole is nice and clear as it is. Boom. But it does not look exactly center, so I think I'm going to have to end up hitting it with a the reamer for a little bit and ensure that the hole is actually the right size and centered properly on the gun. But that's a fairly easy goal or thing to achieve, so I'm not too worried about it. So we're just going to want to tap all of our body pins back out because this bracket should be pretty snug. I'm pretty sure I left it that way for that reason. I'm going to yoink that off, clear off any lovely. So, with that cleared off, I am now going to grab this piece, which I forgot to clean off. 1 second. So, this little feed connection, this goes into the bottom of the gun, goes on this little cross piece, and it should drop right in. If it's not wanting to go in centered, you're going to need to widen the hole. And in this case, it definitely looks like I need to. So I'm going to sit here for a little while. I'm going to widen this hole till I get it to fit properly, and I'll join you all again. Alrighty, boys and girls. Well, with the feed plate sitting in the gun properly, and by that I mean it is fully in the gun, it is loose, it's not being pressed in any direction, way, shape, or form. It's in there, and it's being allowed to do what it wants to do, which is what you want. So now, we are going to go back and install the gearbox, install the barrel setup, reassemble the gun, install the mag adapter, and we're going to test it. So here we go. First things first, we're going to reinstall the gearbox, and on this, do want to make sure if you're routing your wires to the rear, that you are routing them through carefully and not snagging anything or cutting anything. Then we're going to get an air line going down and through, and then pull the wires the rest of the way, like so. And then, as I said before, this front cable will be coming out of the gun, and in his case, it'll be coming out this side. So we're going to make sure that it goes underneath the gun here. And here's also where the front centering clip will be seen installing. Make sure these two wires over here are free of everything. I'm going to really grip down the gearbox until it sits all the way. And it should sit about perfect where the rear screw is already lined up. The entire gearbox looks parallel to the body across the line here, and that would tell you that you're fully seated. The wires on this side are free and not being pinched, and these are hanging out the side as we want them to. They're going to sit right down here and then hang out the side for him to connect his box mag to the gun. So now we're going to get our barrel adapter here. We're going to get that ready. We are going to go ahead and reinstall the rear screw of the gearbox so that the gearbox is being held in at least in some way. We're going to hold off on the grip because the grip is one of the longer tasks in terms of getting the gearbox out. So if we do run into any issues, you really don't want the grip to be on just yet, especially because we already have left to right centering, and in theory up and down centering will be handled between the stock screw and the gearbox centering clip. Once you have finger tightened that screw down, which is a very long screw, you just want to come in here with the driver and make sure it's pretty cranked down in there. You don't want it to move. And now you will see, you can press on this gearbox up at the front as much as you want. It barely moves, if anything at all. So that is perfectly centered, good nozzle alignment. So now we're just going to make sure these wires are laying down up here. Your gun may not look the same, but that is something I need to be wary of in this gun. And we're going to set this down. We're going to get our original barrel. We're going to install the barrel adapter. This one is the OG barrel adapter, just for the OG barrel. I also have one that's labeled SC. If you get one of those, that is for my barrels, the SCUM Custom barrels. That's why it's labeled SC. The notch is in a different spot, and that's why I have two separate versions, but otherwise they are identical. So when that is installed, we then want to go ahead and slide through our barrel, which seems to not want to go through with the tape he has put on the front of his inner. So we're going to remove that. So now, with that tape removed, we will also remove this tape he put at the rear of the barrel, which looks pretty disgusting and torn up as it is. Yep, that's pretty gross. I don't even know if my customer did this. I know this gun's been through multiple owners. Alright, so with all that grody tape removed, we're going to install the inner barrel into the adapter. It should slide nice and freely when you install it. And then we're going to install the entire assembly into the barrel. It should look like so. You should still have a nice freely moving hop unit, and it should sit nice, perfectly vertical in your outer barrel. So now we're going to just skipped a step. Totally forgot to remove the barrel block off this. So I'm just going to put the barrel block back on. Make sure that's pinned. And now insert our hop unit in our barrel. Now, when you install this, you want to make sure this adjustment ring is actually behind that little screw lug. And then set it and make sure it goes over the nozzle cleanly. And then you want to make sure down here, the feed tube of the hop unit needs to sit right on top of that feed plate that we just installed into the bottom of the gun. This will be very easy to check because once we install the barrel nut thumb screws, which this gun seems to not have, which I will have to replace because it does need them. You should now notice that this little feed plate has barely no movement at all, and you also should be able to look through it and shine a flashlight through it and should see a nice tube feed connection, which is not interrupted or has any jagged edges or anything like that. It should just be a nice smooth feed tube to the point where if I were to, say, grab some floor BBs, which I know all of you have because you're watching this video, if I were to drop it down in here, you should see it just perfectly glide right up into the nozzle with no extra force required. So if that happens, then you know your alignment's good, you know your nozzle is good, you know everything's seated as it should be. So now with everything assembled, this cable that he has for his box mag is still nice and free hanging out there. We are now going to look at just double checking that the bracket for the box mag will install properly. These generally also you might have to drill out just a little bit, as I've made sure that these pinholes are really snug and a little low set on the guns. So The other option would be to sand the top of it just a tiny bit at the front end to allow it to go through. Or, you know, you can try tapping it through, and if it doesn't go through, don't force it completely, because you can bend things. This one seems to have gone through pretty simply. So, all we will need to do it's in for now. It will need a little bit of loosening there to go all the way through, but for now it works. And it will need most likely the same. With this pin here. So again, that one went all the way through, so we know that one is good. No issues there. Just that one other pin I did not want to completely go through, but it is fine for testing purposes and making sure the gun works. But if you want that screw to sit all the way flush, you'll just need to take a drill bit and just very lightly graze the inside on the top side to allow for more clearance, to allow your pin to go through completely straight and not be pushing down into the other pin tab. Because if you try and tap that in and it's not aligning, you will actually snap these tabs off, and that is very bad. It almost totally ruins the entire gun if you do that, because you cannot go back to the original box mag and you're stuck with only 249 box mags, and specifically using the old style bolted straight on and not the newer adapters that most everyone is making. So this adapter goes in, and that is all we have left to do on the gun. So we can now reinstall the rest of the parts on the gun that he wanted, which in this case is just going to be his top rail, not the bottom handguard rail, because he did not want that reinstalled. So we're going to drop that back on. I'm going to grab the little screw that went with it. Or not, sorry, not screw. I'm going to grab the screw and the spring that went with it. Put the spring on top of the screw, put that little plate down, and we're going to grab the collar here. I like popping this in just with a screwdriver, just making sure it's nice and centered, like so. And then we are going to give it the barrel screw. It goes up here. Going to reinstall it. Holes lined up on these VCC barrels, because they sometimes like to move around like so. Just got to make sure that the hole lines up enough that we can screw into it properly. That should do the trick. Don't crank that one down too much if you have one of these barrels, because that's just threaded into aluminum, so you do not want to rip those things out. But now your entire barrel assembly should be back on together. Feeding connection should be good. And again, with this feeding bracket on for the 249, you should be able to just drop a BB down into that bracket and tilt it upwards, and you should see BBs flow straight into the hop unit with no added force needed. And then they should come right back out just as easily. So with that, I'm going to say that this install is pretty much done. From here, you'll just reinstall everything back onto the gun. Test fire, check and make sure. As long as your FPS consistency is, I would say, within 10 FPS minimum to maximum starting, before you tune it, before you adjust it, and before you start tweaking things, I would say that is showing that the unit is working properly. Now, on most of these units, the best that I've gotten is 2 FPS minimum to maximum in full auto with 3 2s at 1.85 joules. That was on a different barrel setup, the older ME Sport hop units, but still in F2. So just know your performance may vary, but this is a more reliable, commonly used system that is being implanted into this gun. but still allows you to use all your box mags, M4 mags now even, and you get the added reliability bonus and parts availability bonus with this kit. So with that, I'll just be reinstalling everything onto this gun, and we will pick back off there, and I will just close out some final notes on this. Alright, so it's definitely a whole nother part of the day, but I totally forgot to add to the part of the video where I show the install on this end. So this is really simple. So you'll just want to get your Phillips head, and you're going to unscrew this connection here, which this feed block was already modded onto this box mag. You're just going to remove this top plate, which is fairly simple if this other screw wants to come out ever. There we go. You remove this top plate. You're going to loosen these two screws. They don't need to be all the way undone. Just loosen them a little bit. And you're going to pull the Bowden tube connection out. And you're going to get your little dovetail connections here. So this is what connects to the new 249 adapter. So you'll take this. I like going ahead and getting the zip ties that are included started, and then going ahead and kind of looping it around, pinching it closed. If I can do it right now, would be great. Well, anyway. So you're going to take it, insert the Bowden tube, take your other half, pinch the Bowden tube here, and then I like to stretch it out once I've kind of gotten it pinched here. This one is a little bit harder since it is not one of the kind that is already stretched out on the end. So I'm going to see if I can take a pin here, just open up a few of these loops. Just on the end here. Doesn't need to be too crazy. Just loosen them up just enough so that way you can now insert the Bowden tube and it actually fits into the little rings that are on the inside here. This does take some finagling to get right, but you should be able to get it pretty dang close. And then grab your zip tie. Pinch it around and pinch the zip tie tight, and then what you're going to do is you're going to want to make sure you really just crank down that zip tie as tight as you can go, and then take you some flush cut snippers and just snip that off. And then the idea here is you have your gun. Go ahead and slide the Bowden tube connection in, and then from there you would slide on the dovetail, and you would make sure it is clicked into place like so. And there you go. Bowden tube is connected. Wire is right here, at least on his. Obviously y'all's cable routing may be different. so. I'll have to fix some of his cable routing and probably just improve on it where I can, just to make it a little less out in the open. But yep, that's pretty much it.